Hey, honey.
Yeah, I just got off.
Yeah, I'll be home in about 20. Alright, can't wait to see you. Love you too. Bye. Yeah, what can I do for you?
Hello, sir. We are lost when we arrived at my mother's graduation. Sir, please, when we use your phone, we need to call our mother. She'll be very worried. Sir, we do not have any weapons. Let us inside your vehicle. We cannot hurt you.
Hello? Do you two need some help?
Yes, ma'am. Could I come inside and use your phone? We need to call our mother. She is very worried.
Of course, come in.
Thank you, ma'am.
Everything that you've just witnessed was inspired by true events. There was no particular case that happened exactly like what you've just seen, but more, there was a phenomenon that inspired the dramatization. This episode, like the dramatization, is going to be a little bit different from the past episodes. This episode is going to be more of an analysis. Instead of speaking about a particular case or about particular people, we're going to be analyzing a phenomenon that has mysteriously been happening for the past 20 years, or maybe more. We're going to be analyzing the data, we're going to be analyzing the stories that are given, and we're going to be trying to get to the bottom and uncover the mystery behind the black-eyed kids phenomenon. Now, before I get into the actual analysis, I want to talk about the black-eyed kids themselves. I want to talk about what they look like and what a normal encounter with one or both of them goes like. The black-eyed kids, or BEKs, as they are often referred to as, are children ranging from ages as young as 6 years old to as old as 16 years old with pale pasty white skin that can almost be described as being fitted on, and their signature coal black soulless eyes that strike fear into anybody that stare into them. This phenomenon has been sweeping across the world for at least 20 years, maybe more. The first reported case about these kids was reported and published on an online forum from a Texas reporter who will remain anonymous in 1998. And when he published this story and exposed what he saw to everybody on the internet, he gave way for everybody else to tell their stories and encounters that they had with these kids. Now, a normal encounter with one or both of the black-eyed kids are eerily similar, if not exactly the same. They normally approach a house at night or a car that's normally isolated also at night that has the driver inside. They next come up and they knock on the door, they tap on the car window, and the homeowner, the driver answer. And, at first it doesn't really seem that odd. It's just two kids. And they'll say things like, "We're lost, can you give us a ride?" Or, "May we come in? We need to call our mother, she's worried." Now, what they're wearing is a little odd, but not something to raise alarm. Normally they wear tattered clothes or something of that nature. Normally they wear a hoodie or a hooded jacket that's easily able to cover their eyes at first. Now, when most people engage conversations with the kids, they don't really at first see anything odd with it. It's just two kids that need help. They may be lost or they may need to use the phone. But what happens next is when it starts to get a little odd. People have reported that these kids speak in a manner that's not normal for kids. They use words that kids would not normally use. Now, keep in mind, the age range of these kids are normally anywhere from 6 years old to 16 years old. So using language that an adult would use, it would seem a little odd. They also speak in a monotone, if not emotionless voice, which is also kind of odd. Some people describe them as almost being robotic. Now, when they get farther into the conversation or the encounter, because sometimes people, they don't say anything because of what happens next, the people start feeling an odd sense of fear and anxiety towards the kids that they can't explain. They almost describe it as primal, like something in them is telling them that there's something off about these kids, but they don't know what. And then this makes them even more anxious because they want to know why they're afraid of these kids and why they're here. Now, the kids cannot come into the home or into the car without permission. There's been some cases where the kids have even said they cannot enter without permission. And of course, this raises a little bit of alarms too. Now, as the fear and the anxiety keep building and building, and the kids become more aggravated, they'll either bang on the window or they'll bang on the door, and they'll say things along the lines of, "Well, we don't have any weapons. How can we hurt you? We're not going to hurt you. We just want to use the phone." Now, when you're approaching someone, especially at night, and you say something along the lines of, "Oh, we don't have any weapons. We're not going to hurt you," that's kind of a little odd in itself. And when they start getting more aggressive, this is when the true fear sets in. Now, it's been building up to this moment, but here's when it gets worse. The person looks up at the child, and they have coal black, soulless, hollow eyes. Their whole eye is black. Now, as you saw earlier in the dramatizations, only this part of the eye was black. Their eyes weren't completely black. Now, of course, they were using contacts. And that's something that I want to bring up because a lot of people say that it's just a bunch of teenagers or kids running around with black contacts trying to scare the crap out of people. But the kinds of contacts that you need to cover your entire eye are very expensive, which normally kids around those ages wouldn't be able to buy unless they had a really good job for some reason. And another thing, the contacts that cover the entire eye are very painful to wear. They stress the eye worse than normal contacts. So for these kids to run around and play this prank on people where, yes, it is possible, and in some cases it may even be that's what's happening, but it doesn't really seem likely that someone would go to that much trouble just to scare somebody, unless they, for some odd reason, had the extra money and time to waste. To me, it just doesn't add up, in my personal opinion. Now, when the people see that these kids have black eyes, their fear skyrockets to a point where they didn't even know it was possible to be that afraid. And they get out of that situation as fast as they can. Now, when the encounter's over, sometimes the people look back just to see if they're still there, to make sure what they saw was real and they weren't seeing something or their mind wasn't making something up. But when they look back, the kids are completely gone. Now, in cases where it happens when someone's in a car, that's completely impossible. If they're in the middle of a parking lot and these kids come up and they knock on the window and the car speeds off and then looks back, there's no way those kids are faster than a moving car, especially one that's in that great of motion. Now, along with the primal fear and the anxiety and the stress and the dread, these kids almost have a hypnotizing nature to them. Earlier I mentioned the anonymous reporter that put his story on the internet. He claimed also that when he was trying to roll up his window and drive away from the situation, he almost felt as if his hand was moving towards the door handle to let the kids in. Now, when he looked out, sure enough, his hand was moving, but he was not in control of it. Now, what's going on here? Do they have mind powers? Are they able to manipulate your limbs? Or what's going on here? Something supernatural is going on here. Now, in this analysis, we're going to try to get to the bottom and try to find out what these kids are, what they want, and why they're here. Some of the ideas of what they are range anywhere from vampires to ghosts to demons and yes, even aliens. So next is going to be the analysis portion of the episode. Now, the first claim that we're going to be looking at about the black-eyed kids is that they could be the possible ghosts of deceased children that were killed in a violent way or died suddenly. Now, as we look at the comparison between the ghosts and the black-eyed kids, they only have a few things in common. Though ghosts could have black eyes, it may depend on how they died or how they want to portray themselves. The black-eyed kids, of course, have black eyes. Ghosts make people have a feeling of anxiety or fear when they see them. Normally they're stunned or they're frozen. They're not really sure how to react. The same thing sort of happens with the black-eyed kids. They also feel anxiety, fear, and dread and want to get out of the situation. And ghosts, of course, they're famous for appearing and then disappearing after an encounter, which the black-eyed kids also do. Now, as we look at the comparisons between ghosts and the black-eyed kids, we also have to keep in mind the differences as well. Now, normally ghosts don't approach a car or approach a house like that and try to get in and become aggressive. Now, they could, depending on, like I said, the way they died, or if they're malevolent or evil spirits or something of that nature, but I don't see how a group of ghosts are appearing around the world trying to get into people's houses and people's cars for unknown reasons. The next claim that we're going to be looking at is a little odd and kind of shocked me when I came across it. Some people claim that the black-eyed kids could be a form of fairies. Now, if we look at the comparisons here, we see that people that have had encounters with fairies, they say that they have some kind of primal feeling that can't be explained. Now, this may not be fear or it may not be anxiety, but they just feel like something's off about the situation, or something is telling them that this being is not what they think it is. Now, of course, we look at the black-eyed kids, and they also, you have the familiar primal sense of fear that's unexplainable. Now we look back at the fairies, and we have more encounters that they say that they feel almost hypnotized, and that they do as these beings ask. Now, when it comes to the hypnotizing for the black-eyed kids, it was in the original account and a few other stories, but it's not a prominent claim about what happens during an encounter with these kids. Now, the last thing in common is that fairies also disappear suddenly when the experience is over, and the same happens for the black-eyed kids. They also appear to suddenly disappear when they feel they are not welcome or they're not granted entrance to the home or the car. The next claim we're looking at is if the kids are some form of demon or something from the pits of hell. Now, demons are often portrayed in art and movies and shows with soulless black eyes like the children. Now, if someone comes in contact with a demon, the person does have a great deal of fear and dread, but normally the person's not able to detect that something's off. Normally, if, like, say a person is possessed, they normally know the person is possessed before they go into the situation. So there's no, like, primal fear or primal feeling telling them that something's off. They already know that there's something off about the situation before they go into it. Now, as with the black-eyed kids, they don't know that something's off, but their primal instincts are telling them that something is off during this encounter. Now, something else that's interesting to look at with the black-eyed kids that they have in common with demons is that, to me, when I read these stories and accounts, that the black-eyed kids almost seem like they are following a script, or they're following someone's orders to come to these people's houses or their cars, and nobody knows why. And other people have found this interesting as well. And one theory that could be given to this is if they are in fact demons, then the demons could be showing up to collect souls or do something else of malevolent nature to these people. For the next claim, we're going to be talking about aliens. Now, as many people know, the most common alien that is depicted is the Gray, which is the small 3 to 4 foot size humanoid with a big head, gray skin, skinny body, long limbs, and big, completely black eyes. Now, of course, we know the black-eyed kids also have black soulless eyes just like the aliens. There's another claim that when the kids leave, or while they're still there, they give off an odd odor to some of the people. Now, again, this isn't a claim that's very prominent in the stories, but there are some cases where the people say they smell something odd. And to people who claim they've been abducted by aliens, they also say that the aliens give off an odd odor as well. Now, people have also said when they're abducted by aliens that they feel a sense of anxiety or fear, and it's on an unimaginable level. But again, like we talked about with the demon perspective, these people, when they wake up, normally in an abduction case, they're on a slab or they're on a table with a bright light in their face. So they wake up and they already know something's off. We go back to the kids with the same perspective as we talked about with the demons. They know nothing's off. They think there are kids just coming to approach them and ask for help, and then the anxiety and the fear set in out of nowhere. Now, along with aliens, their motions and their personalities almost seem robotic, as do the black-eyed kids like I mentioned earlier. Now, aliens, they do appear and they do disappear like the black-eyed kids, but normally they disappear in a flying saucer or a UFO or a spacecraft, according to witnesses. The black-eyed kids, they just simply disappear with no trace of them even being there. So, to me, they don't leave in any kind of craft or vehicle of any kind. The last claim, and to me, the most that the kids have in common with, is vampires. Now, of course, we know from reading Dracula and reading other vampire stories, the vampires in old myth needed permission to enter a home or a form of housing, or they couldn't enter. Now, this is also prominent with the kids. They cannot enter unless they have the person's permission to let them in. Now, depending on what culture you look at, the vampires could have completely black eyes, but it's not a consistent thing in the folklore. With the black-eyed kids, it is consistent. Their eyes are always black. They don't change. Now, vampires are also characterized as having ghostly pale white skin, just as the black-eyed kids are. Some say that the vampires also have a hypnotizing way about them, as I'm sure you've seen in books and TV shows and movies, where vampires are almost kind of like a seductive symbol, and they almost hypnotize a person into falling for them. Now, the black-eyed kids are not hypnotizing in this way per se, but they are hypnotizing in a way that people perform actions that they don't remember. Like I said, also not a very prominent claim in all of the stories, but it's still there, so we cannot discredit it. Some stories of vampires, they also say they can get very aggressive and very violent if they aren't welcomed, or if they're angered, or if they feel threatened. Now, the black-eyed kids can also become aggressive and violent, but it's only when they aren't granted entrance. So maybe if they are vampires and they're trying to get inside and suck people's blood or consume them, then I'm sure this would probably anger anybody that was, or a being that was trying to do this. Now, also, some stories include a vampire disappearing and never to be heard of again, but I don't know if they disappear into thin air like the black-eyed kids, or if they have just become masters of disappearing for nobody to ever find them again. I didn't find any stories where vampires disappeared into thin air, but I'm also not discrediting that they can, because I've not experienced one myself. Now, in my personal opinion, on all the data I have and all the stories that I've read, I think that the black-eyed kids phenomenon and the kids themselves are something that we are not aware of. I think it's something that is entirely new to us, because like I said earlier, the stories of them only came out in the late 1990s. So if that's when they started, was in the 1990s, they've only been around for a few decades. Either way, these kids have not been around as long as some of the other myths or the other encounters or supernatural beings. In my personal opinion, I think that these kids are a new phenomenon and a new supernatural being that we are dealing with. Now, if they are, in fact, something new entirely, that begs another question of where did they come from? But we will not know the answer to that until somebody lets them in and survives the encounter. I am not by any means telling anybody to let these kids in, because there are some stories of people that did, and those people were not heard from again. So if you do see these kids and they do approach you, please get out of the situation as fast as you can, because if you let them in, it will not end well. Again, I cannot stress it enough. Do not let them in. But as I said, until someone has a further encounter with one, we will not know what they want and why they're here. Do not forget to hit the red subscribe button below for future videos. You'll get a notification for that. Also, below there are links to the Facebook page and the Twitter page. Do not forget to like me on Facebook and follow me on Twitter. And please also share this video with your friends and your family and everybody that you know, and comment on it in case you want to see something in the future, or if there was something about the video you particularly liked or disliked. Criticism is always a good thing. Now, also, if you want, if you have a story that you've experienced yourself that was odd or paranormal or supernatural or just something you couldn't plain out explain, please leave it in the comments below, or contact me on Facebook or Twitter and leave your stories, and who knows, maybe your story might be used as an episode on the show. And like I said on my social media before, Stories of Lore is on a new schedule. It is bi-weekly now, so every other week, and that week in between I use to get all the research that I can possibly get my hands on so that I can give all the facts to you guys. And of course I use it for casting, for the dramatizations, for, you know, a little something extra to watch. So, like I said, subscribe here, like on Facebook, follow on Twitter, and thank you guys. Wait for the next episode.